Okay, I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District regular board meeting of Tuesday, July 13th to order. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, who have stewarded these lands and waters since time immemorial. And today we have Article 36 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples, in particular those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contracts, relations, and cooperation, including activities for spiritual, cultural, and political, economic, and social purposes with their own members, as well as other peoples across borders. States, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples, shall take effective measures to facilitate the exercise and ensure the implementation of this right. And with that, we move to C. We don't have it in camera, so we have the adoption of minutes for June 29th. McCollum and Cole Hamilton, thank you. Any discussion of the minutes? And all in favor of receipt or adoption? Anyone opposed? That's carried, thank you. And we're on to delegations. And today we have the Comox Valley Youth Climate Council to talk about the Green New Deal. Hamir and Wells, thank you. And we will welcome Lister. Hi, Lister, can you hear us?
Oh, sorry, I was muted on my microphone. We are here from the CYCC, Marie-Gabrielle, Ben Mason, and I'm Lister DeVitre. And hopefully, if Marie-Gabrielle is able to share the screen, we will start our presentation.
Yes, you should be able to share.
I see that she has been made the host, so she can do that.
Oh, we're just letting another attendee into
Sounds good.
the meeting. Okay, you should be good to go.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for having us. So we are the Comox Youth Climate Council, and we're here delegating for our case for a Green New Deal. So about us, we are in the Comox Youth Climate Council. We're a group of youth aged 13 to 25 who are passionate about climate justice and bringing concrete and meaningful climate action locally. And we would like to acknowledge that we are working on the unceded homelands of the Comox First Nation. So a Green New Deal is a piece of policy that brings together the changes that are needed to take concrete action in the face of the climate crisis, focusing on climate and social issues. So locally, this means improving sustainability and quality of life. And municipalities and regional districts really can have a strong say by demonstrating how these changes can take effect at a local level and influence federal and provincial governments to take action.
So of course, the issue of the day for us is climate change and the history of our times. But so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us that we have to cut our emissions 50% by 2030, which of course the CVRD has as a large goal for them, net zero by 2050. Solving climate change is going to require massive change, meaning and we're going to be transitioning into a very new world with it. So this means that a big part of a Green New Deal is a just transition. So making sure that as we change, we're not leaving anybody behind, and that we're not changing fast. We're having people brought along with us and helped to move into the future. We've already seen the effects locally of climate change. Obviously, with the heat wave is a very recent example of what we might see with climate change. And climate change intersects with many other issues. So this is something about a Green New Deal that is, I think we all really like a lot, is that it's not just looking at climate change as a single issue, but it's understanding that it has so many other issues. People already affected by systematic inequalities will be disproportionately affected by climate change. So then that means that any problem we have with climate change, we have to actually work on it from many different axes and make sure that we're solving those issues as well as climate change. So deal with inequity at the same time.
Lister, I think this is your turn.
I think he got kicked off for a moment. I'm not sure if he's back or not. We'll just make sure he's able to get on. Marie, you might actually need to let him in.
I'm so sorry for that. I was just changing between the different windows, and then all of a sudden it stopped responding. So yeah, I will get back to part 2. Sorry about that. So the current response. So individual action we know is awesome, like composting, awesome. Electric cars, electric bikes, or just riding your bicycle. Active transit is awesome. But there's only so much that individual action can do. And that's why we're going to a regional level. And of course, provincial and federal is good too. Municipal is good. But today we're talking about a regional level, and that's going to make all the difference. So we already have a sustainability strategy and other individual strategies that are a great framework that we can use to build off of. And that's going to be really helpful going forward. But there's just a few questions we need to ask ourselves when we're looking at what we've done. Are we prepared for the climate emergency? Are our current policies enough? And have we reduced our emissions sufficiently? And while we've still done a lot, and it's awesome what we have done, if the answers to these questions are not really or kind of, that means we probably have a bit of work to do. So our Green New Deal, these are just suggestions, and the document we made is relatively general for the whole Comox Valley, but these are our general asks. So declare a state of climate emergency. You guys have already done that, so we're off to a good start. And develop a new climate emergency plan. That's something that can be worked on. Review existing official community plans, or in our case, the regional growth strategy, to incorporate recommendations, and then support an equitable and just transformation rooted in climate justice, respectful of Indigenous peoples, and that creates sustainable jobs.
So our Green New Deal touches on a lot of different areas, as many areas as we can, because of course, as I was saying, the goal of a Green New Deal is not necessarily just to look at climate change solely as its own thing and to look at each individual thing, but to compile them all together so we can try to make society as a whole better, all at the same time. It has sections on emissions targets, low carbon jobs, Indigenous rights, equity and justice, land use and development. It has governance processes, energy and electricity, zero waste, transit and transportation, drinking water and wastewater. Those last three are obviously big ones for the CVRD, as they are, we have quite a lot of power with those. Also has food security, which on Vancouver Island we're quite at risk of. We're quite at risk for food security. Health, carbon sinks and biodiversity, revenue generation, and climate adaptation. So making sure that even if we do make huge changes, we know that climate change has already happened and will happen. So we need to make sure that we're ready for that, and we can find sustainable ways to make sure people are safe.
So our Green New Deal is our ask as the youth in this community to we are asking our elected officials to take the climate emergency seriously. Our life quite seriously depends on the action that we take today and the quality of our life as we move forward in this very uncertain time. We ask you that you develop and implement sincere climate emergency plans, that you review your existing official community plans and incorporate our recommendations, and that you work with us to implement our recommendations at the regional level. So we're just The CVRCC is deeply grateful to the Comox First Nations present in ancestral care of the land and waters, and we recognize our responsibility to support the efforts to decolonize and return these lands to their original stewards. And we're also very grateful for you to listen to our presentation today and to consider our proposal, and we are happy to answer questions.
Great. Thanks so much for all of your presentations, and sorry about the little bit of technical hiccup there. We do have some questions for you, starting with Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair. And a huge thank you to all of you who've put the time and effort into creating this document and your presentation. Ben, Lister, and Mary Gabrielle, thank you for coming out. You know, I think kudos to you for such a comprehensive document. I might ask, you know, Ben, you touched on a number of reasons why we can't just look at GHG emissions. Does anyone have any other, if you don't mind teasing apart, why is it important that we need to look at race, women and gender issues? Like those were in the document, and probably something that the public aren't really, maybe not understanding why they're there. Would you mind elaborating?
Ben, you want to do this?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up, because that is a very important thing. So as I was saying, like, yeah, people who are already affected by different inequalities will be more affected by climate change, and there's many different examples of that. So it's just, and this is really with any emergency, it will affect those people more. So we have to make sure that, and a lot of the problems that cause climate change are problems that cause other problems as well, like greed and whatnot. So we have to make sure that when we're trying to make a plan, it's not about just going, okay, how do we move forward from climate change and go back to and change, and you know, it's going to require so much change. We don't want to necessarily just move forward from it and, all right, that's done now, we can move, but we want to dream and see a better world after it. Since we have an opportunity, we're going to have to change. So do we want to go back to the old ways and just and not remember how we got here, or do we want to actually fix all of these problems along the way?
I have just a little something to add. So just more, I think it's pretty general, but more a specific example. So anybody that's already economically disadvantaged, like from a systemic racism or sexism or whatever it is, they're not necessarily going to have the means to deal with climate adaptation on their own. People with less resources just won't be able to make those changes that are going to require capital. So if we can counteract this and work around this and make sure everybody is going to be adapted to what is already coming, what's locked in, I think that's pretty key.
Well, fantastic. And if I just make comment to, you know, I think if any of our community thought that climate change wasn't actually real, or that maybe we would benefit in Canada from climate change, I think the last couple of weeks has surely woken everybody up to the seriousness of what can happen. I look at the number of deaths on the mainland, and you know, you point out elders who weren't able to have air conditioning, you know, really face the full brunt of that. And this is probably just a sign of things to come. So, you know, as one of the elected officials, I think I can only speak for myself, but very much taking this seriously. And as you know, with my background on the food security side of things, this is really worrying. If this is the trend that's going to continue, how we're going to be able to feed ourselves. So thanks very much for all your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly lots of unforeseen things, like the BC Hydro cable on Texada Island melting and the high temperatures. There's, you know, lots of things that we can't foresee that are going to be happening as well. Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. I've read some of your material before, and it's excellent. Really thrilled that you have the social equity piece in there. And interestingly, you know, a lot of the conversation on climate change has only started including that recently, and I think it's really great that that you've really taken a comprehensive approach to that. So I think my question was partially answered, the question that Director Hamir posed. I think probably some of the examples that you have of how we can do that are things like, you know, transit passes for low income. And there's a lot of practical things that we can do to look at those kinds of barriers to people. So thank you so much. I don't really have another question per se, but I'm just really happy to see the social equity piece so integrated into this plan. And I suppose you're going to be part of the brain drain and you're going to leave us soon or something, go on to greener pastures, but I'm hoping not. I hope that you'll stick around and maybe continue to lead us in a great direction. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Alternate Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, just huge kudos for this presentation today and the level of detail on the document you provided. The amount of work and thought that's gone into this is obvious. And I think, you know, to a couple of points Director Hamir had mentioned and Director Moore on the social side, you know, during the fires in Lytton, I believe one of the First Nations chiefs there was pretty appalled by the fact that about 12 hours after the people were being evacuated, he was finally called, but only to see if he needed help with his animals, but not actually helping people. And that type of thing is really been brought to the forefront, has been mentioned before. My bigger question though, is really about action, like how do we move this forward? And one of your points in your presentation was to work with, like there's obviously things that we can do ourselves, but part of it was working with yourselves on the Climate Council. So how do you see that happening? Is that something you see as committees that would be with various local governments, whether it's the regional district, or is that people coming to your meetings that you have? How do you see that working out?
Marie, do you want to take this?
I'd actually leave that to you, Ben and Lister, because you've worked with Cumberland already with your proposal. So maybe you can say what has happened there.
I think in the short term, probably the simplest thing to set up would be some sort of discussion. It doesn't need to be super formal, but just discussions between the CYCC and then the regional district, whatever directors are interested. So some simple discussions just to work out like that issue of how we're going to work forward or move forward with you if you decide to work with us. So I think, yeah, for the short term, simple discussions, and then for the longer term, whatever we figure out during those discussions is how I would hope it would go.
I think we would like a new, we would like a plan set in place solid for climate change, and that also hopefully intersects with the issues in our Green New Deal. So, and we hopefully can use the Green New Deal as a good starting point for that.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Director Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks so much for this. Is just almost overwhelmingly comprehensive, your document. And I was impressed that it didn't come, that you also seem to be taking biodiversity into account as one of the major factors. And you probably read that, I guess it was last month, that the IPCC and the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity sort of stated the two really cannot be solved separately, the climate change and our inability so far to live within the means of our planet need to be viewed connected in a connected fashion, which kind of leads me to just, again, the comprehensive nature of the document that you've created. Do you think it would be useful to bring in staff, possibly the staff who deal with the regional growth strategy, given you talked about large planning documents like OCPs? Would that be a good kind of collaboration structure between your group and the regional district?
I think that would be a great way to start it off. I think ideally we would have a specific climate plan, because the regional growth strategy is to do with sustainability, but it's also to do with kind of everything. But the regional growth strategy, since it's due for a review, I think that would be a great place to start, or one way to work on this, because if it's something you guys are already planning on doing, if there's any way we can fit in some of our ideas with that, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, well, that's we should talk amongst ourselves and figure out how we can get you connected with the staff and sort of working to see what can be brought in from what you're doing into the regional growth strategy. But Thank you again. This is a remarkable piece of work, and we look forward to digging into it. So thanks.
Thanks so much.
And Director Hamir.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on the last comment about bringing staff in. And I'm wondering if staff could comment on their ability to work on something like this. I'm hearing a few things, potentially a climate plan, a separate standing document, implementation or integration of some of these ideas into the regional growth strategy. And I'd also like to ask if there's a possibility of any of these items being made available for our strategic planning session that's happening this fall, if there's things that might be easily adoptable. Would staff be able to comment on their capacity?
Upon just an initial review of this very comprehensive plan and proposal brought to you today, I see that there are some initiatives that you have taken, and I think the delegation recognizes that, so that's easy. Those are things in motion. There's things that are within your control and ability to do, and then there's other things that may be more appropriately held by another level of government. Staff could definitely review the document and get back to you, the directors, to identify those particular things. But in terms of the ideas that they have that are new, our work plan is really full at this time. We've just come through the pandemic and responding to Rethink Comox Valley and evaluating all of our services. But that's not to say with additional resources, we could meet our objectives if you decide to adopt some of these new items that they brought forward.
Okay. Would you mind a follow-up then?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering if the board would entertain, after we receive the delegation, a motion to ask staff to come back with a report, sort of highlighting some of these things that our CAO just mentioned. So I'm just gonna sort of notice of motion there.
Yeah, and just to speak on the experience of Cumberland, after their presentation to Cumberland Council, the mayor and I had a series of meetings with Ben and Lister, working through all the resolutions. And like staff mentioned, there are some things that we're already doing, some things that are done by higher levels of government, and sort of weeding through that down to the ones that we could implement. And it was a great experience for me just to say, you know, they're awesome and intelligent and passionate people, and it was really a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So we're on receipt, and all in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Go ahead, Director Hamir.
Yeah, could I make that motion that staff return to the board with a report outlining where, you know, many of these ideas, there's a climate plan and the ideas in the Green New Deal, how they could be implemented by the regional district.
Okay, seconded by Director Cole-Hamilton. Any further discussion? Director Grieve.
Just as a point of order, we normally do not action information that we get from a delegation, but we usually review it in the months following. So maybe it would be better to bring this forward, maybe ask staff, do a very preliminary cursory kind of a report and see if we need any further actioning at the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just go to CAO. That's your understanding?
That was my understanding of the motion, that basically these are a number of proposals for your consideration as to whether you proceed with them or not. And what staff are doing is saying, you know, this is an item already in the works, or this is an item that needs your attention otherwise. Really, we're just informing you of what the implications are of their ask at the next meeting. I think it's a reasonable ask.
Okay, any further discussion? Alternate Director Wells, go ahead.
Thanks again, Chair. Just based on your existing conversations, I wonder if it'd be fair, and maybe it's too soon, but if Cumberland could share their experiences in their list, because that might actually expedite the staff's time. And I would probably say other municipalities may be interested as well. So
Absolutely, yeah. Would be happy to share that. And I think Ben and Lister have all that information too. If they wanted to forward that on to the regional district as well, that'd be great. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. So thanks again, Marie Gabrielle, Ben and Lister. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to reports, we have the Comox Valley Transit Management Advisory Committee minutes from June 10th. Amir and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And oh, do you have a question? Oh. Okay, all in favor of receipt of those minutes? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. And we're on to item 2, the 2021 corporate plan. Grant and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And the 2021 corporate plan is being published. James Warren, Deputy City CAO, is here to present that, along with the support of staff to highlight some of the projects that have been accomplished over the last year.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Russell. Good afternoon. So directors, as you know, the CVRD board sets the high level direction for public services and then provides for the funding and other controls that allow those services to be delivered. To help guide these actions, a strategic planning process is used where the directors are regularly informed on community conditions and other strengths and weaknesses. Focus areas are identified and initiatives are set. The drivers and initiatives are then used to help define the CVRD's work plans and budget. Last month, the 2021 corporate plan was published, marking a milestone in the strategic planning process. The plan describes the board's drivers and highlights key initiatives, helping to tell the story of the CVRD. The drivers in particular are referenced throughout the plan, emphasizing how CVRD services are being delivered in a fiscally responsible way while supporting community partners and in response to the climate crisis. And of course, the commitment to reconciliation and relationship building with Indigenous peoples continues as a priority. Rather than establish a new service to address any of these topics, the board has demonstrated leadership by embedding these drivers in all of the projects that we undertake. Today, a few of our staff will provide a short overview of some key projects that exemplify effective service delivery and collaboration. Given the wide array of activities staff are working on, it was difficult to identify just a few projects for highlighting today, but we think these demonstrate your drivers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie Gore, who I think is on the telephone. Charlie?
Thank you, James. Yes, so I'm here to present to you today about the Comox Valley Water Treatment Project. I'm sure many of you are aware of the project and have been part of some of the more detailed updates. But today I just wanted to talk to you about how this project is going and how it relates to those 4 strategic drivers that we have for the CVRD. You can see here on the screen the scope of the project, from the new lake intake out in Comox Lake to the raw water pump station, which is on the shore of the lake there, transporting raw water up to our new water treatment plant, where it will undergo 3 different forms of treatment: filtration, UV, and chlorination. And you can see the pipe gallery where our new UV reactors are up in the top left there. Down the treated water pipeline, which you can see being installed on the bottom left of the slide there, which is parallel to the BC Hydro penstock, before tying into our existing transmission system. This new project provides a huge amount more resiliency and higher quality drinking water for our public. With the new lake intake, we are now far more resilient to changes in our water source quality from potential wildfires or changing temperature due to the climate, as well as water availability. We are also serving our public with higher quality drinking water, protecting them from further potential viruses that our previous system was not able to protect us from. And this project is going to be completed under budget and on schedule, showing that fiscal responsibility that we have to our taxpayers in delivering large infrastructure projects like this. And lastly, this project has really fostered strong relationships with our First Nations. To achieve this project, there was strong collaboration with Comox First Nation with regards to the permits and water licenses necessary for the project, and also to achieve grant funding. And through the project, there has been great success in employing Indigenous peoples as well as KFN subcontractors to work on the project to effectively provide a great success for both us and Comox First Nation. So I look forward to our new drinking water reaching all the taps of the Comox Valley and celebrating this project this fall once it's all complete.
Thanks, Charlie. Now look to Howie Siemens to provide an update on emergency programs and emergency preparedness.
Great, thanks, James. Through the chair to directors, it's been quite a year for the emergency program. So, and that really that defines that your choice of making this a core service is really a foresight and important for us to be able to realize and move forward. Everything in this past year has really been focused for the emergency program at the community and social well-being and strengthening relationships. As we went from 473 days of operating a regional EOC for COVID in supporting provincial island health authorities and establishing strong Comox Valley EOC teams and approaches for consistent and supportive collaboration and communications. A part of this in the background that probably you weren't much aware of was we had emergency support services volunteers still responding to support those who've been evacuated from fires situations through the COVID and into actually this year as well. So in 2020, they had 7 calls supporting Courtney, Comox, Oyster River, Fanny Bay, and Forbidden Plateau. They dedicated 65 hours towards those services and helped 43 evacuees. Already in 2021, they've supported 3 activations in Black Creek, Miracle Bay, and Hornby Island, with 10 hours at this stage and with 4 evacuees served. Also, a big part of the project of EOC was based on a phase 1 after action report that was done and the recommendations that came out of that. So we've been working hard with our IT and other key staff to try to implement some of those in our new Harmston EOC, such as independent servers for the EOC for a more secure, separated filing system, cloud-based storage and access, Wi-Fi system that will allow EOC external staff, being other local governments who wish to use this facility or as a part of our EOC team, as we saw in COVID, to be able to access off their own work laptops. Enhance audio and visual displays to allow GIS and other resource mapping processes within the EOC. And then, of course, the biggest tool of all was implementation of Zoom, so that with the beneficial of be able to have virtual EOC actually take place without being in person. Also a part of this was an opportunity for us to work with our elected officials and our board to develop a regional EOC leadership policy group. And this has been a great success with this, again, strong collaboration and with their leadership with procedures and policies. We also just came through a heat wave support to health, and there's lots of lessons that we need to learn. But the key part we did play was to centralize messaging and provide public information about the cooling centers and areas that you all supported the community of the Comox Valley. And the also created work plans for workstations for the Comox Valley Emergency Support Service and radio. So we actually have converted the EOC into an office space for some of our volunteers to work out of. And just an update that we are finishing off the design of our fracture on 5th exercise, and we will put it on the shelf for looking at opportunities to deliver it in October of 2022. It was a consensus based on the design groups and just trying to catch up after we got to get out of COVID. And lastly, we are working with all our response groups at this time and our support organizations in advanced planning for wildfire as we just entered in extreme, and we want to make sure that we are all sort of talking the same language. Thank you.
Thanks, Howie. Regan Jameson is here to provide an update just on our COVID action team, some of the work that was done early in the pandemic, and some more recent activity as well. So Regan.
To the chair, to the board. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. As James has said, I'm here to speak on community partnerships and the CVRD COVID response and action teams. In April of 2020, the CVRD formed a COVID action team that was comprised of staff members from various departments within the CVRD. The purpose of the CAT team was to reach out to our local non-for-profit organizations to inquire how COVID-19 had impacted their organization and the citizens they work with. This outreach work identified a few areas where our community organizations were having a difficult time meeting operational needs while working under the strict FOE guidelines. Gathering this information allowed us to bring together different groups to build collaborative partnerships to address these challenges. For example, the Comox Valley Hospice Society was challenged in getting food deliveries to individuals in isolation. The CAT team then connected the Comox Valley Hospice Society with BC Transit, and BC Transit was able to assist in some of their grocery deliveries. In December 2020, we followed up with these organizations to see how they were doing and if there were still struggles they were facing. During this outreach, not-for-profit organizations were assessed, and those demonstrating the most immediate need for support were invited to apply for assistance through our Emergency Operations Center Restart Grant Fund. We had 3 successful applicants for the first intake and are currently awaiting applications to come in for the second and final intake for this grant. For projects to be successful, they must demonstrate how they are addressing one or more of the goals for social and community well-being that are laid out in the CVRD Sustainability Strategy and the Comox, our CVRD Rethink Comox Valley project. These goals are funding opportunities that target homelessness and food security, that all residents of the Comox Valley have adequate housing, safety services are provided to all residents, that all residents have access to sufficient food to meet the basic requirements of a healthy diet, and that all residents will have access to services, amenities, and cultural activities necessary for a high quality of life. Separate from the COVID action teams, but very much related to community partnerships and supporting the board's driver for Indigenous relationships, I wanted to briefly share with you the outcome of a grant for creating and implementing a summer cultural day camp in partnership with the Watche Friendship Center. This camp led to further collaborations with Comox First Nation and School District 71 Indigenous educators. The camp was designed to strengthen the public's understanding of reconciliation by raising the awareness of Indigenous cultural identity. The camp provided an opportunity for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth to learn about Indigenous culture and history. Through activities such as talking circles and storytelling, the participants learned about ancestral teachings and traditions and discovered the importance of the connection to the land. This was a very successful project. We had 31 children enrolled, 3 staff members involved, 3 Métis educators and storytellers, along with a student volunteer and catering by Tony Frank of Comox First Nation. This camp is now in its 2nd year and has become a permanent summer program within the CVRD Recreation Department. Thank you.
Thanks, Regan. And so Christiane Weil is now going to just provide this brief update on the KFN Chief and Council project meetings. Christiane?
Thank you, Chair. In July 2019, Comox First Nation Chief and Council generously granted the CVRD's request for a monthly standing agenda item to facilitate discussion about CVRD projects that may be of joint interest. This process to ensure meaningful engagement with KFN was an important step in moving forward together to implement UNDRIP. This has been a very positive experience for our staff, and we're extremely appreciative of the valuable dialogue and the opportunity to receive advice and direction at the council table. This has resulted in a process which requires our managers to rethink where to engage KFN in the project cycle, which is at the beginning of a project and in accordance with the nation's own procedures and decision-making authority. In 2 years, we've had 27 meetings and completed engagement on 11 projects. A strong example of this process at work was the negotiation of the sewer agreement that provided support for the liquid waste management plan and allowed us to move forward with a conveyance solution for the Comox Valley sewer system. We also worked with KFN last year to implement new signage at Seal Bay Park, incorporating the Coast Salish Ayajuwitham language. A key focus of the CVRD moving forward will be working with Chief and Council on the implementation of KFN's cultural and heritage policy, as well as a shared celebration of our partnership on water at the grand opening of our new water treatment plant. We currently have a list of 26 active projects that we look forward to advancing with KFN in the coming years, as we continue to focus on Indigenous relations is a key driver across all of our service areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. And lastly, Robin Holm will provide us an update here on the coastal flood adaptation strategy.
Through the chair to the directors, the coastal flood adaptation strategy has been a key project for the CVRD for the last couple of years. It directly responds to several of the board's strategic drivers, specifically climate crisis, fiscal responsibility, and community partnerships. The overall goal of this project has been to minimize flood risks and vulnerabilities while building resilience. The CVRD has demonstrated fiscal responsibility by accessing grant funding in order to undertake this work. In 2019, the CVRD received $500,000 to develop the updated floodplain and coastal flood mapping. And in 2020, the CVRD was able to access $150,000 to undertake the adaptation planning phase. And as well, the project has also enabled the CVRD to strengthen community partnerships by taking a regional approach to our mapping scope, including portions of adjacent jurisdictions. The CVRD is now in the position to be able to share this very important information with our community partners. We are currently in the process of packaging and preparing this data to share with the regional stakeholders this week. And this information will be able to be directly used as an input into informing their flood planning, emergency preparedness, asset management, and climate change adaptation planning. With the completion of this phase of work, the hazard analysis phase, the CVRD has all of the data that is needed to understand our coastal flood hazard and risk within the context of sea level rise and other climate-related impacts. And this will allow for us to plan for future climate change conditions and make science-based decisions that will enable us to actively manage our coastline.
Thanks, Robin. So thanks for those presentations. To close, I want to look forward to the September 28th and 29th strategic planning process, or sessions, I should say. Alison Hapkirk will be with us again, and we'll look to affirm the board's drivers and the key service outcomes. Alison will focus on this board's final 13 months in office and ensure the board's direction continues to be meaningful. Alison will also spend some time with you talking about the challenging and wicked problems facing this community, some of which don't necessarily fall to local governments or cannot be resolved by one entity or a single action, but all of which require a greater awareness. Madam Chair, staff are available to answer any questions that the board might have.
Great. Thanks so much. I don't see any questions, but I do want to say a big thanks to staff. You know, these are huge successes. the water treatment plant, and having such a huge infrastructure project happen during COVID over the last year and a half, and still having it come on time and under budget is amazing. And our emergency response to such a very long emergency response to a very unexpected and unusual emergency was very laudable. And during that time of crisis when things can often break down, and I think that the community really pulled together, and we were able to strengthen our community partnerships, and in particular with our KFN partners. So it's all just really, really great. I'm so proud of all of you. So thanks so much. Director Hamir?
Thanks. I just wanted to echo Jesse or Chair Kettler's comments about how well staff really rose to the occasion. And I really enjoyed listening to all the success stories that we heard today. So thank you to staff. My one question was around the action team that was put forward during COVID, kind of cross silo, is something that I think the board has been watching really interestingly. It's something that we kind of we're really wanting to see. And I'm wondering, since now the EOC has been disbanded, we're not in that emergency, can staff see any kind of lingering, cross, sectoral, engagements with each other? Is anything going to continue despite the fact that we're not in an emergency anymore?
Thanks. I think the collaboration that we experienced through the pandemic, it's those learnings are great, and we'll be able to carry them forward. And we do look for collaboration amongst the branches as much as we can, and with our municipal partners and community partners as well. So you will see more cross-branch activities and looking to find more efficient ways to deliver services in that meaningful way. So yes.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. So thanks, Regan, Howie, and James for the presentation. All in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We're on to item 3, the 2021 Unified Alternative Approval Process results. Grant and Grieve, thank you. And I'll pass it to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Jake Martins, General Manager of Corporate Services, is making his way up to the podium to provide the results of the alternate approval process and setting it up for the consideration of various bylaws actions or other things as a result.
Thanks, Russell. As described, Madam Chair, this report summarizes the results of the unified AAP process. Alternative approval processes are certainly not new for the regional district, but the unified aspect is. And so, as the board will recall, earlier this year, through the Rethink Comox Valley Plan, the board supported the notion of bringing the various elector approval processes together at a single time to save money, but more importantly, increase engagement and transparency respecting our approval processes. This year, the first year of it, brought together 7 very distinct initiatives, which can be generally described as 2 electoral area services to provide funding support to community halls, 1 mosquito management service in the Saratoga Beach area, a loan authorization for the sewage conveyance project, and 3 rural roadside garbage and recycling collection services. The elector response period for this process ran from June the 3rd to July the 5th and closed at 4:30 p.m. that day. And in addition to the specific project communications that were undertaken, the official notice was published in 3 consecutive weeks of the local paper, as well as additional newspaper and social media advertisements promoting the overall process. At the close of the deadline for the bylaws, those respecting the community halls, mosquitoes, and the sewer conveyance loan authorization did receive less than the 10% threshold, and as such may be considered for adoption and are on the agenda later on in this meeting. And as the 3 roadside collection services exceeded the 10% threshold, the board can either advance those initiatives to an assent vote or a referendum, or they can choose to abandon those initiatives at this time. At yesterday's Electoral Area Services Committee meeting, the directors did consider this precise question and resolved to not proceed to an assent vote at this time, but did provide direction for staff to further assess options within the broader context of the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service. This report here is provided for information as there's no decision required at this time, but those four previously mentioned bylaws are on the agenda for the board's consideration later on. And with that, I'll be pleased to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Jake. I think Director Arbor has a question.
Thank you. Mostly just comments. I think it was really good that we did the unified EAP and had a few proposals in there. I think that worked out really well. I'm really happy to see that the community halls in the rural areas will be supported more consistently moving forward. In the Bainstown area, that's 5 community halls from Royston to Union Bay to Fanny Bay that will have that more formal relationship with the CVRD. And I think that will benefit the communities for a very long time. In regards to the recycling and garbage pickup, we're about 100 years ago, we started generating quite a lot of garbage, and I don't think we've perfected the way that we deal with it yet. And unfortunately, it's a problem that is likely to persist for hundreds and thousands of years. So I know some people are hoping that we stop talking about solutions to some of the problems we have, but I think our communities expect us to do better on the waste management front. So I look forward to staff coming up with different ideas and the community as well engaging with us in how to achieve better recycling outcomes, reduce our methane emissions, and also have more convenience for people. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Director Grieve.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Referring back to the alternate approval process, there was some discussion of it not being democratic. And I think we saw very clearly that we had over 2,000 people actually take their application forms or their comment forms personally to the RD to weigh in on the process. So definitely we had, I think, what was it, about 15% as a rule, 12 to 15% as a rule in the different areas come in. Now, I would recognize the fact that that there was some discussion yesterday at the ASC about maybe deferring this forward and perhaps just gauging the groundswell of people on the opposite side of the opinion. I've been asked, what about the other 95, 85%? When do they get to weigh in? But we were basically told by staff that there just isn't enough time to rejig this and take the comments and considerations, because there would have to be some adjustments if we wanted to bring it back. We'd have to actually address some of the major concerns, and there just would not be time in the 80-day time period we had to bring it forward for referendum. So rather than bring it forward with no time to reevaluate and without any revisions, there was absolutely no point in pushing an unreformed plan forward. And there was some good comments. I acknowledged also the BC or the CVRD front counter staff that were the ones that were in the front lines actually talking to the residents that came in. And, there was all kinds of comments made. Some were actually to do with local government and the recycling contract award. So I think that the underlying problem remains, as always. There is just too many recyclable products ending up in our landfill. And we heard at our last Waste Management Board meeting that we had to now start budgeting for a second cell, $8.5 million. And that there's still, I can't remember the exact figure. I know at one time it was almost 40% of the stuff going into that landfill was either organics or else recyclable products that we already had markets for. So we have to find a better way of collecting that. And we have to also inform the public that you either pay for it one way or the other. So if we're paying $8.5 million for another cell when we could actually extend the life of that cell and save everybody money. We're going to have to research whatever ways we can to make it more equitable, more sustainable, and also to save the taxpayers money in the end. So I think it bears rejigging. It bears taking into consideration some of the comments, especially ones around the inability to opt out, things like that. We have to consider that if we're ever going to bring this forward again. So I think we keep the door open, but we go back to the drawing board and see if we can come up with something that's better. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grieve. I don't see any further comments. So we're on receipt. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. So we're on to bylaws and resolutions for first, second, and third reading. The first one we have is bylaw number 658, the Union Bay Fire Protection Establishment. Grant and Arbor, thank you. And all in favor? Anyone opposed? Grant and Arbor moving third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So we're on to bylaw number 2, which is bylaw 659, the Union Bay Street Lighting Service. Grant and Grieve for first and second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. On to third reading.
Second, third.
Grant and Will Cole, thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously, thank you. On to number 3, bylaw number 660, which is the Union Bay Water Service Establishment. Grant and Hamir for first and second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That was carried unanimously. On to third with Grieve and Grant. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We're on to item 4, which is bylaw number 666. Ooh, Union Bay Water Service Capital Reserve. Yep, for first and second, Grant and McCollum. Thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we're on to third for Grant and Morin. Thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. On to item 4, on to item 5, which is bylaw 667, the Union Bay Water Service future expenditure. Grant and Grieve, thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Third, moved by Grant and Hamir. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're on to item 6, which is bylaw number 669, Union Bay Fire Protection Service Capital Reserve.
First and second.
Grieve and Grant for first and second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Grieve and Morin for third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We're on to item 7, bylaw 670, Union Bay Fire Protection Service future expenditure.
First and second.
Cole, Hamilton, and Grant in unison for first and second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. Grieve and Cole Hamilton for third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. We're on to item 8, bylaw number 671, the Union Bay Street Lighting Service future expenditure reserve. Grant and McCullum for first and second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? It's carried unanimously. Grant and Grieve moving third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. we're on to items for third reading only. Item 9, bylaw number 645, Comox Valley Animal Control Extended Service Conversion Bylaw. Grant and Grieve moved third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 10 is bylaw number 646, the Regional District Fireworks Regulation. McCullum and Grant for third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? It's carried unanimously. And we're on to bylaws for adoption. This bylaw number 636, the Bay and Sound Community Facility Support Service. Arbor and Hamir, thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that was adopted unanimously. Okay, that's the Black Creek Community Center Contribution Service, moved by Grieve and seconded by McCullum. It's for adoption, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. On to item 13, bylaw number 638, the Saratoga Beach Community Mosquito Management Service. Grant and Hamir. Just a little comedy show here. This for adoption. Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. And we're on to item 14, which is bylaw number 647, the Sewer System Conveyance Project Loan Authorization. Wells and Grant. And this is a big one. It's for the loan authorization for 52 million. And it's for adoption. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're on to the addendum. Can I get a vote to consider the addendum?
So moved.
Grieve and Moran, thank you. All in favor of considering addendum? That's carried. Okay, so we are on to item 1, which is Electoral Service Area Committee from July. Oh, is it receipt or is there just the recommendations? Okay, just the recommendation. And it has to do with the financial plan and capital expenditure program for Bay and Sound. Any further discussion? Yeah, it's a vote of the areas. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. And that's the end of our meeting. Somebody want to move termination? We'll call Hamilton and Director Hamir. Anyone opposed? Great. Thanks, everyone.